I'm here with Mike Gray, who had worked with AFSC programs on the Pine Ridge Reservation, as well as a number of other Native American reservations throughout the United States. I'm here. My name is Joshua Wilson. I'm here to interview Mike in conjunction with a number of programs that are run through William Penn House, specifically the Pine Ridge Reservation program. So I wanted to ask Mike here a few questions. I'm going to start off with Mike. How did the Pine Ridge program begin?
Gerald Onefeather worked for the American Friends Service Committee, and he invited me to come up. And that was, boy, this is where we need editing. Gerald, the Quakers worked with the Indian people up there for a long time in limited capacity. Individuals would go up and help out. But it wasn't until after the Wounded Knee takeover of 1973 that the American Friends Service Committee got actively involved. After that takeover was negotiated and over, American Friends Service Committee sent representatives out and sat with the people and asked them what they would like help doing, what they would benefit from. And out of those discussions, the Keeley radio station is one of the things that the American Friends Service Committee helped start. It was the first community radio station on Pine Ridge and still operates as a nonprofit, just celebrated a big anniversary. But what the people needed at that time was a way to communicate across the reservation and talk to each other and try and bring themselves together. It's the second largest Indian land base in the United States, way spread out, a lot of poverty, few people had cars or access to telephones, and so they wanted communication. But that's when Quakers went out there to listen to them and see what the problems were and how they could work together to resolve them. They hired local staff, and Gerald Onefeather was working on the reservation at that time. And his work was in resurrecting ceremonies and traditional ways of working together in the Teoshpai system. And Gerald was my mentor, became my mentor there, and helped me do a needs survey of what we could do in the Joint Service Project. The Joint Service Project was between the American Friends Service Committee and Intermountain Yearly Meeting, a way to help Quakers understand the American Friends Service Committee and work better with them, and the Service Committee could better access Quaker volunteers. And so I was there in a kind of a mixed capacity, but I started taking groups of volunteers up to work with Gerald. We built ceremonial structures. And what I found in the needs survey was that I could help with housing. And so we started working on housing with Gerald doing his work with reconstructing these ceremonies and bringing back a Tokala society. And so our volunteers helped prepare ceremonial grounds and get things ready for these ceremonies, and worked on housing in between. So housing was the big issue, but hanging out with Gerald was even bigger, where we talked about spiritual beliefs and processes and ceremony and how differences in religions and samenesses in religions can transcend cultures, where the Quakers were able to do things with Native Americans that other churches weren't able to do because of our belief that their beliefs were as important as our beliefs. They came to them in a searching manner and approached them with a seriousness that they had a right to celebrate. Their religious practices were prevented by law for nearly 100 years after the first Wounded Knee massacre in the 1890s, up until the American Indian Religious Freedom Act was signed in the 70s. Their religious practices were illegal by federal law. But now they were beginning to come back, People were studying them, people were beginning to do them, and feeding that back into their culture. And so I was able to participate in some of these ceremonies with Gerald and talk with the people and understand their feelings about them, which led me to continue to keep this as a part of our work, making sure that they had the freedom to practice their religion as they were led, and to help prepare the way for them to do this. So we continue to support a small family Sundance is an ongoing project that William Penn House has worked on with me for nearly a decade now.
How did the William Penn House program get established? How did you find those folks? And then also, what are some of the activities and what is it you guys had hoped to achieve in the vein of your work previously with AFSC and Gerald Onefeather?
Well, Gerald has since passed on, and the AFSC was in a process of their simplification process. They were trying to streamline the work of AFSC and put it all into focus groups. And my project was always in a box sort of on the edge of the flow chart, because we were a joint project with the yearly meeting, Intermountain Yearly Meeting, and AFSC, and so we didn't fit into any of these boxes neatly. And so there was a move to just lay our program down. But people in Intermountain Yearly Meeting who felt strongly about keeping the program going were looking for another entity that would take up half the cost of the project and help oversee it. And so they approached William Penn House to see if they were interested, because William Penn House was one of the last Quaker organizations that continued to do service projects and support service work amongst Quakers. And so it looked like a natural relationship, and so Brad Ogilvie came out with the William Penn House and one of the last projects that I led there for the Joint Service Project. But the yearly meeting decided to lay down their end of the project as well, because the project was designed to help Quakers work with AFSC. That's why it was a joint project, and so they didn't think going with a different entity sponsor would do the same thing, so it all just laid down. But I continued to do what I was doing and continued to do contract work with Quaker schools, and the William Penn House contracted me to lead a project with them the following year. And so that's been going on pretty much ever since.
Okay. So what is it that you guys have been doing on Pine Ridge with William Penn House?
Well, we continue to do this pretty much the same work I did. Housing is still a big issue, and it's an easy volunteer task to accomplish. We can accomplish a lot with volunteers who just need a little training to, we fix windows, we patch roofs, we fix walls, we fix doors, we build housing. More and more we've moved into the area of low-tech building, volunteer-friendly building, partly to make it easier to use volunteers on the reservation, but partly because there's no money to pay professionals on the reservation. So, and we find that this is an interest of Quakers, and one of the places where we overlap is sustainability and economy. And so we've built straw bales and cob houses and loose straw stuffed walls and houses out of pallets and locally available, locally sourced materials with volunteer labor. And these are projects that the community are already working on that we can help out with, but actually people live in the houses, so it's immediately pays off once it's finished. And we also then work to support ceremony on the reservation, traditional ceremony. And this way we get people who come out on one of these projects have a chance to experience the breadth of Indian life in the U.S. There are a lot of problems with homelessness and alcoholism and drug abuse and all of these things. On one end, we see the results of poverty and alcoholism, but on the other end, we get to see the celebration ceremony and the importance of spirituality in the life as a way of overcoming these problems and transcending them. So it's a chance to see the whole, all the way across the reservation, how people live. We can't stereotype indigenous people in this country as all drunken Indians, and they're not all sun dancers, but there's some of each and all, just as there are in all cultures.
You touched a little bit on this, but I guess next question I'd like to ask is, what do you hope participants in this program will walk away with?
Well, that's number one, that they are no longer able to stereotype Indians and even different tribes. You can't even say Indian in this country because there's maybe 300 indigenous groups in this country. They all have different practices, they all have different belief systems, they all have different cultures that they live. Some are nomadic people, some are some of the longest continuously inhabited villages in the what we call the United States are Indian villages in Hopi country. And so there's all kinds of Indian peoples doing all kinds of Indian things. But you just can't lump them all together anymore. You have to come to know them individually as tribes and as individual peoples. And that's why peoples is that S on peoples, indigenous peoples. They're not all the same. There are many, many different indigenous peoples and tribes.
Okay. And what sort of material benefit or cultural benefit do you hope to leave on the reservation?
Well, material, I mean, I'm kind of proud of the fact that I can go there now and see people and go to their homes and visit with them and see them living in suitable and safe and secure housing with running water and electricity and sanitation facilities and living a much more comfortable life than they were living when I met them. That's the material part. The spiritual part is that I want to leave that understanding with them that people of other cultures and belief systems don't necessarily look down on theirs or think that they need to change theirs. Their religion and spirituality is valid and it works for them and it should continue to work for them. They should be allowed to practice them the way they see fit and not have to put up with people trying to save them or evangelize them or fix them or move them into a better way, because they're doing just fine. They did just fine for generations and generations. And we support them in being who they are and how they choose to be without judgment.
And I think finally, what is it that you hope participants will learn? Not just necessarily about how to exchange, but also in just the experience itself.
Well, my projects were always designed to help people experientially understand the testimonies of Quakerism. So, for instance, when we talk about equality, we have to come to understand that we can't bring everyone up to being equal to us. And that's a cultural imperialist thought anyway, that we are the culture that everyone aspires to be or should be. We need to understand that sometimes equality means that we're going to have to leave things behind and come down to a different level than what we experience and are used to and think is where we need to be to find true equality in the world. It's sometimes we're the ones that have to move. We can't move people to where we are. We have to move closer to where they are. And the generalization that when you work with other people, you try and approach them as equals to begin with, rather than you going there to help or fix or solve their problems or do for them. You are there to learn from them, to learn how to be, to how to act as if you are already equal and begin your relationship from there. That So it's really about us more than anything. And this learning you can use anywhere you go with any other culture, any other situation for the rest of your life. But first look for that bottom line level where you approach people as equals that you can learn from and share with, and not you're just there to help and fix.
Well, thank you, Mike, for your pearls of wisdom, and hope to have you for a number of years with us at Pine Ridge. All right, thank you.